We are page 78, 8 lines from the top of the page. אמר רב הונא, עמוד ברשות הרבים גבוה 10 ורחב 4 ונעץ בו יתד כלשהו מעטו. The שפת אמת have an issue with this subject since it's looks like a different part of the discussion which we have yesterday. It's dealing here with reducing the heights of the kotel, of the wall. So Rav Huna here is the first opinion. We have here basically 3 different opinions, page 78. There are 3 different opinions. The first one is Rav Huna. He said if you have a pillar that it's in the public domain and they have heights of 10 handbreadth and they 4 handbreadth wide, so he said the first stage of that it's considering Reshut HaYachid because it's a private domain. But the moment Na'atz Bo Yated, which means he drove a stake of any side into the top of it. So what happened now, it's change in Miyato. He changed the situation from private domain to exempt Makom Ptur. Why? Because it reduced the side. You remember yesterday we talked about the 4 tfachim. We speak about the 4 handbreadth that people can walk in this domain. So here we discuss here a situation that the minute he stick that yated, the amount of the property reduce. So he said he basically changed the whole status. It's no longer private domain. The second opinion, Amar Avad Barava v'gavoa 3. Avad Barava said that it has to have the height of the 3 handbreadth. You remember we discussed lavud many times. So the stake has to be a 3 handbreadth high. So he said that only in that circumstance it's considering that he reduce from that amount. But if it's not 3 handbreadth, so it's considering part of the roof and is not reducing it. The third one, Abai v'Rava d'Amrit Rabbi, or pi she'en gavoa 3. They both, Abai and Rava, said even doesn't have the 3 handbreadth. But anyway, it's considering he reduced the side and he abrogated it, he annulled it, he renounced from the Reshut HaYachid, from the private domain. And the reason it's because since he doesn't have a 3 handbreadth, it's basically velo mishtamesh le, he doesn't use it much. Because they said the minutes that he stick that stake, what happened is he delay the use of that domain, which means here you see basically the third opinion. Let's see, Rav Ashi Amar afilu shegavoa 3 ma'itama efshar l'talya b'midei. So basic here you see 3 different opinions. The first one is depend if it's above the 3, so it's batel mitachtav, it's renounced what below. The second one is said if you have the use of 3 by 3, so the minutes you have the 3 by 3 handbreadth, it's basically disturbing of using it. And then you have the third opinion. He says, Rav Ashi says the opposite. Even you have more than 3 handbreadth, he says because sometimes it's used. It's he says that you can put something on that. Have they use hang things on this. So people take those stakes and use it to put things on them, especially in the old days. they can use it for different things. If you remember the old days, they used to put for example, laundry. They have those sticks, and people put a laundry on those sticks. So since he used it, and it's a potential that he hang item on there, so even it's no longer possible to rest the object on the top of the pillar, it's still useful in some way. So Rashi holds that that's enough to incorporate that as a one domain, that they have 4x4, and therefore the Reshut HaYachid is not renounced from that pillar, unlike others. אמר לרב אחא ברי דרבא לרב אשי, מילאו כולו ביתידות מהו. So here look at the picture. Picture 262. Everyone see it?
Yeah.
So Rashi said, מי אמרינן כיוון דלא משתמש בה רוחב לאו רוחב הוא. See, he put many stakes. It's not just one. So אמר לרבי אשי, לא שמיע לך דהה, אמר רבי יוחנן, בור וחולייתם מצטרף לעשרה. So he said, don't you go by what Rabbi Yochanan said, that it said, if you have bore, this is the, like a pit, a dick. So he said, Rashi said, קרקע שנתלה מחפירת הבור, והקריפו בו הבור סביב. So they dig a hole and they take whatever it's come out of that ground and they make this. So in other words, you dig in the ground and you take what you have in the ground and you put it around. So it's called Chuliyat Abo. So he said that in that soil that come out, he can use it to add, to make a 10 handbreadth. So it means that the depth on that bore, on that hole, it's join this part to make it together a private domain. So they ask Ve'amai, what's the reason? Halo mishtamesh li. He's not using it. So why are you considering it as a part of the 10 handbreadth? He said, Ela ma'it lach lemeimar de manach mideu mishtamesh. But he maybe put something here and he can use it. Achaname de manach mideu mishtamesh. Here too, you can say that a person can put something, like he put a little wood, or here they use the word daf, which like a keresh, like piece of wood, that it's a 4 handbreadth, and therefore that stake, that pillar is considering private domain. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Kotel. Now we go back to our subject, which is if you reduce the heights of a kotel, of a wall, that it's between 2 domains, 2 yards. So here is the yard, here is the kotel, is the wall. So אמר רב יהודה אמר שמואל, כותל 10 צריך סולם 14 להתירו. This is the size of 10 handbreadth. So he said, if from here, you see, from the bottom to here, it's a 10 handbreadth. So he put the letter that way. This is labeled 14 and some, 14 handbreadth, 13 handbreadth, 11 handbreadth, okay? Yes. So he said, since this wall has a 10 handbreadth, so you need to have the 14 handbreadth to make it available. So you basically need to move it 4 from the kotel. You see, because this is that that side if it's standing still, but here, because it's a larger, you put it in that way. So Tosfot here explain, and Sfat Emet explain, the key point is that you have 4 handbreadth from the ground. So imagine this is 10 and this general side is 14, so it has to be that this ground is 4. That's what the Tosfot and Sfat Emet said. Rav Yosef אמר אפילו 13 או משהו. Rav Yosef said 13 it's enough. אביי אמר אפילו 11 ומשהו, even 11 in something. Why? Because if you put it in the right way, so you have 3 handbreadth from the top. So if you do that, it's considering, as we studied many times, lavud, it's considering it's a satum, it's a black. Ravuna bred Rav Usha אמר אפילו 7 או משהו. Said even 7 a little bit. So he basically said he disagreed with all the idea to put it like that. He said you can put it straight, and as long it's convenient for him to go up, it can be almost straight, as long as it can come up. So he said 7 is enough, and therefore 7, and you have 3, it's lavud. Marav sulam zakuf mima'et Gemara v'lo yadana ma'etama. He said the upright ladder effectively diminishes the heights of a wall as it creates a passageway, and he said but I don't know why, I just receive it and I don't know the reason. Amar Shmuel v'lo yada Abba ta'amad ha'milta. Don't you know the reason for that? Shmuel many times in the Shas called Rabba, so it's like the honoree. So he said, don't you know it? He says, Mida de Hava itztaba al gabe itztaba, because it's the platform above another platform. So it's basically reduce the height, because even that part it goes straight. Rashi said that basically platform like that, one on top of the other, it's reduced. Amar Rabba bar Reb Chia, dkalim shebebavel. He said the palm tree in Babylonia. So you put it next to the wall between 2 courtyards, so people could climb on them and pass to one courtyard to another. So he said, enan tzrichin keva. So they don't. You don't need to put it. You know, to establish permanently and attach to the ground. Maitama. What's the reason? Kveidan kovatan. Their heaviness establishes them as connected to the ground. So even you can take it on Shabbat, but because people don't get used to take them, so you don't use them, and that's it. Rabbi Yosef אמר רבי יהושע, רבי יהושע, סולמות שבבבל אינם צריכים קבע. A Babylonian ladder does not establish a fix permanently in place. My tama, what's the reason? Kveidan kovatan. So because they're heavy. So it's large, they're heavy. It's different, it's hard. Man דאמר סולמות כל שכן קלים. ומאן דאמר דקלים, אבל סולמות לא. So one who said that the ladders, so for sure a palm tree. So because they are much heavier than the ladders. But one who said the palm tree, the heaviness is the one who make them. So he said, but if a letter it's less heavy than the palm tree, so the heaviness it's not considering a fixed place, and therefore is designated to be moved from place to place, and therefore you need to in a letter it's not a fixed place, so you have to put them in there. So basically in Babylon the whole idea is that the palm tree is much heavier than those letters. So in that sense the palm tree it's considering more permanent because of their heaviness, but the letters no. There are those who say that it's because the palm trees you cannot use them for any form of sitting. It's a temporary use. Anyway, בעמיני רב יוסף מרבה, סולם מכאן וסולם מכאן וקשים באמצע מהו. So here it's a picture number 265. So if you have a ladder and a ladder and וקשים באמצע, and it's and in the middle between them is a woven straw which is not support in a person weights because it's nothing, it's not a solid. So what's the halakha? The two letter considering a single unit, forming letter 400 wide, which is services diminished to the height of the wall. אמר לי אין כף הרגל עולה בהם. No one can step on this one. So it's not a letter 400 that you can wide. It's not fit and does not diminish the heights of the wall. So it said קשים מכאן וקשים מכאן וסולם באמצע מהו. Okay, so you have this is in between a letter. So you have a straw in each side. So he answered and he said, אמר לערב כרף רגל עולה בהם. The sole of the foot can climb upon them. So the letter appeared to be 400 wide. So it serves to diminish the heights of the wall. Just turn the page 78b. חקק להשלים בכותל בכמה, אמר לי בעשרה. So Rabbi Yosef asked if the letter resting against the wall less than 400 wide and one dug out grooves in the wall as extensions of the rounds of the letter to complete the measure. So he said to him, if it's a 10 handbreadth height and 400 wide, it's considered a passageway. So basically, if you look carefully, you see the chakikot. Okay?
Okay.
אמר לי חקקו כולו בכותל בכמה? אמר לי כמלוא קומתו. So he asked a question, what happened if he did the entire? So he said if he dug out the entire ladder in the wall, so he said those steps must reach the full height of the wall. So they said, Umaishna, why is that? Amar le hata mistalakli, hacha lo mistalakli. Think about it. People, which one? People get easy way to go on the ladder, to climb the ladder. Here, there are only grooves in the wall. It's very inconvenient. It's not easy to climb, right?
Yes.
So if one cannot reach the top of the wall, the steps are not considered a passageway between the courtyards. So, Be'amine Rav Yosef Merabah, Asa'ola Ilan Sulam Mau, if one make the tree that stand next to the wall between the 2 yards, he made it like a ladder to go up the top of the kotel, the wall. So that tree is considering an entrance in order to allow those yards to make the Eruv together. Even, as you know, is a rabbinic decree that we should not go up on the tree on Shabbat. So they say Tibai leRabbi v'Tibai leRabbanan. This is a problem in both in the Rabbi Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and it's a problem with Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi hold that if you use the Eruv Tchumim, the Shabbat boundaries, but if the Shabbat boundaries placed on a tree, it's a problem. He said it's an issue because he said in one hand you can use it by force of circumstance, but it's not so simple, because in general the rabbis have a prohibition to use a tree. Now, if you talk about the sages basically say that you cannot use Eruv Tchumim. But here you may say that they make an exception. How? So they go now to details. And they said, Tibai leRabbi is the issue of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Ad kon lo kama Rabbi Atam, over there in regards to Eruv Tchumim, that you have joining boundaries. So if a person put the tree and he put the Eruv kol davar shuhu mishum shvut lo gazru alav. So anything that it's mishum shvut, so it's a general term that they said that anything that is prohibited on Shabbat because it's a shvut is a rabbinic decree, so you're allowed to do it at the time of the twilight. So that's apply hanemi lei ben hashmashot. That's applied to join boundaries that you make in the time of the twilight. Aval kuleyam yoma lo. But in regard to entrance between the 2 yards, so Rabbi said that you can use the tree. Or dilma afilu leRabbanan pitchau. You may say that even according to the opinion of the sages, the tree is considering an opening. Ve'arya hu dervia alei. But a lion crouches upon it, which means that in a sense you take it's just using a euphemism, using some type of metaphor, and they say that it's like a lion sit on there, which means the prohibition of shvut, of rabbinic decree of using that tree on Shabbat, it's avoiding us from using it. It's like imagine you have a regular entrance and you have a lion there. So if you have a lion there, people don't use it, don't cross it, right? So the same here, that the whole idea of using a tree on Shabbat is prohibited by the sages. So now, Asa olech le'ashera, if he used the tree, which was in those days very common for idol worshipping, and there's many sentences in the book of Dvarim that say that we're not allowed to use any type of tree that's used for idolatry, and it's a biblical prohibition. So therefore the question is, if he used that tree sulam, he used that tree for what? It'd be like a ladder that he can cross between the 2 yards. What's the deal? So they said, Tibai le Rabbi Yehuda v'tibai le Rabbanan. So now we have a problem. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, that allow, if you have Eruv Tchumin, that you put on the top of the grave. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, if you remember, we said it in page 31. So he said, even the grave is forbidden to derive any benefit from a grave. But here, you may say that it's a issue. Tibai le Rabbanan, that Rabbanan said that if any Eruv Tchumin put on the top of the grave, here maybe you can go differently, and here they go the details. Tibai le Rabbudat kam Rabutatam, the mutar liknot ba'id b'surei hana'ah. You can make a shvita, a dwelling in a place, in the grave. So basically, so he can use it. Think about, in those days they have the cemetery outside of those cities. So people put the eruv on that grave. So it's considering like you purchase a dwelling place, and therefore it's an issue to derive any benefit. Because by doing so you make that grave a place of dwelling. And he said, Elahatam de batar de kana le'eruv lo nicha le delinta. But you can say that over there it's different. Why? Because since after the eruv was acquired a place of residence for him, it is important to him that it is guarded. And or dilma, or you go the opposite way. Afilu l'Rabbanan pitchahu ve'arya dervia alei. So he said, even according to the sages, considering an entrance, but again you have the lion crouches upon it, so it doesn't have the status of opening. Amar lei ilan mutar v'ashera asura. He says you can use the tree as an entrance between the 2 yards, but you cannot use something that you take in Asherah, in idolatry, and you use it as a ladder. That's a problem. It's like the Rambam said, you're deriving some type of joy from that idol worshipping. So you see that these strong prohibitions so many times in the Torah against idol worshipping, this is part of the issue. That even you use it as a ladder between the 2 yards. Matkif la Rav Chizda adraba. Rav Chizda attacked and said the opposite. Ilan שאיסור שבת גורם לו ניצר, אשר איסור דבר אחר גורם לו לא ניצר. He said, come on, let's go the opposite way. Tree, what's the issue with the tree? Is like the lion, because what? The sages put a decree not to use a tree on Shabbat. So therefore, so you cannot use, so now you said if there's any use for that, you should make a prohibition against it. But the Asherah, this that used for idol worshipping, so the prohibition is nothing to do with Shabbat. This prohibition is against what? Worshipping idols. So if that's the problem, he doesn't use it in any form of that. So we should not make it a problem to use the Eruv between the 2 yards. And I'll bring the opinion that supported what Rav Chizda said. He said, Itmar Namei ki ata Ravin. Ravin was a great rabbi that used to come from Eretz Israel to Babylon. So they said when Ravin came, Amar Rabbi Elazar. He said on the name of Rabbi Elazar, Ve'amr la Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol she'isur Shabbat garam lo asur. Kol she'isur davar acher garam lo mutar. He said, anything that with regard to which prohibition on Shabbat causes to be prohibited, so it's prohibited. But if you have something else that causes, then you can use it as a entrance between the 2 yards and make the Eruv between them. So now what we have so far, we have 2 opinions, right? One said that Ilan mutar and Ashera asura. Second one said the opposite, that Ilan asur and Ashera muteret. Now we go to the third opinion. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak matneyache. Ilan plugta de Rabbi v'Rabbanan. Ashera plugta de Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbanan. So he said it's involved to 2 separate disputations. When it's come to a question of a tree, and you ask in question, can I use a tree as an entrance? That's a dispute between Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and the sages. So the same way says the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and the sages have a different opinion in regard to using a joining Eruv Tchumin by using that tree, that Rabbi allow and the sages did not allow. So the same apply to the tree between 2 yards. And according to Rabbi, the tree can use to have this both yard using together, making the Eruv. And according to the sages, no, you cannot use. Now if you go the Asherah, you ask a question if the Asherah is the one that using for idol worship is considering the opening or not. So here is a machloket, is disputation. And he said, Rabbi Yehuda allow, Rabbanan, the sages forbidden. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda considering this an entrance, and therefore you can join Eruv. But according to the sages, it's not considering an entrance, and therefore they cannot make the Eruv together. So basically what we understand is that according to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, he hold that what the sages said, that you cannot put the Eruv Tchumin on the top of the grave. Why? Because they hold that the minute you have Kinyan Shvita, the meaning that you dwell there, it's like you derive benefit from that grave. So therefore, if you take Eruv Chatzerot just by the idea of using that Asherah, that idol, worshipping as a letter, it's basically you're deriving, as the Rambam said, you're deriving some benefit from that Asherah. And Rabbi Yehuda said that you can go ahead and put the Eruv Tchumin on the top of the grave. Why? Because he said it's not considering deriving any joy from that. It's basically the Tosfot here elaborate, and he said that Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak disagree with all this sugya. So basically, here you see the machloket, the disputation within disputation, which means basically the first question is if you can use Ilan or Asherah as a letter between the 2 Eiruvin, and then you derive indirectly the whole idea of deriving benefits from the Asherah, and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak basically is the one that it's depend on those disputation between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan. Now, I think it will be very good for those who view us to go and read the Ritva, because he elaborate and expand the whole sugya here. Now, the Mishnah that we're about to study is the Mishnah that dealing with separation or attachment between two yards. So, why we need this subject? It's because we're talking here about Eruv. Picture 268. Everyone see it?
Yeah.
Elliot?
Yeah.
Okay. חריץ שבין שתי חצרות. You have 1 yard, you have another yard, you have a ditch. You see the ditch between 2 yards. Okay? עמוק 10 ורחב 4. It's 10 handbreadth depth, and the wide it's a 4 handbreadth. So the Mishnah said מערבין 2 ואין מערבין 1, which means each yard needs to make a separate Eruv, and you cannot have a joint Eruv. אפילו מלקש או תבן. They said even that you have what? It's a field of cash, even you have the straw or hay, it's not regarded as sealed and you cannot use it. However, מלא עפר או צרורות, if a person filled with a dirt or pebbles, so he said if that's the case, מערבין 1 ואין מערבין 2, the opposite. So they can make it as a 2 Eiruvin, as a 1 Eruv, sorry, but not as a 2 Eiruvin. Now, נתן עליו נסר שרחב 4 טפחים. If he put here this neser, the board that has a 4 handbreadth wide, and it's basically, it looks like a staple, you know, it's like attached the two properties. So it's basically, Rashi explained that it's like a bridge. So וכן שתי גזוז תראות זו כנגד זו. One property, second property, you see these balconies, and they put here this board. So there are some who say that you have in between Reshut Harabim, a public domain. And there are those who say that it's one next to the other. So explain, מערבין 2 ואם רצו מערבים 1. In this type of situation you can either way, either go by 2 separate Eiruvin or you make it as 1. פחות מכאן, if doesn't have a 4 handbreadth, so in the case that below than 4 handbreadth, מערבין 2 ואין מערבין 1. So you have to make it as a 2 Eiruvin, but do not establish 1 Eruv. So that's basically Rashi's opinion, but if you look at the Tosfot at the very end, you see here that Rabbeinu Tam said that this part of the Mishnah doesn't deal with the Gzuz Traot. So, but again, I wish to have more time to elaborate on that. So the Gemara asks, "V'teven lo chayetz," by putting here a teven it's not, if you fill with the hay, so it's not a proper filling of the ditch because it's a small ditch, so you fill it with hay, so what's the problem? So the Gemara said, V'hanantnan, we said, and that's Mitzvah Shem, the next page, matben sheben shtei chatzerot, gavoa 10 טפחים, מערבים 2 ומערבים 1. So we said later that if you have a haystack 10 and breadth high, so you make it establish 2 Eiruvin, but you not establish 1. So it means that if you're using a hay in between, you can make it as one single mechitza, one single partition, and you can use it as a Eruv. So why you don't use hay as something as stima, as filling up in between, and you make it as one Eruv. So the same way as you're using a teven, a hay, between the yards, it's applicable as making as a mechitza, as a partition to divide them. And we don't say that since in the future you're going to take out the hay, so what? So it's like someone doesn't have it. So here we may say that the hay may be used for filling it. So Amar Abaye, Abaye explained, Le'inyan mechitza, in regards to a partition, he said, Kule alma lo plige de'ava mechitza. Everyone agreed that it's a partition. Even Rashi explains that in the future they're going to take it. Aval le'inyan chatzitza, but in regards to chatzitza, it's like a separation. So he said, "Ibat lechayetz v'lo bat lelo chayetz." So if you make it as a chatzitza, so he said, if he make a clear renunciation and he explicitly nullify that the hay he planning to do what, never to take it from there, that's fine. So you can use it to fill up this part. Imagine the man standing there, he fill up the hay and says, I commit myself to do what? Not to pull out the hay from there. So that's fine. So you can use it to fill up that ditch. But other than that, if it does not fill it, and the ditch is not considered a seal. Maleh afar. But if the ditch filled with the dirt, so he said, Va'afilu bistama. So even the Gemara asks if he's not clear that if he's planning to take it out or not. Vatnan, we learn in the tractate Aholot, chapter 15, Bait shemilahu teven otzrot ubitlo. So over there in Aholot, it's speaking about Tumah and Tahara. So they said that if it was a house that one filled with hay or pebble, and then the hay or pebble decided to leave it in the house, then the Rambam said that the house now is in a new status because it's nullified. It's no longer considered a house with partition. So they said, Bitlo ein. If he nullified the hay or pebble, yes, the house is nullified and considering sealed. But he said, Lo bitlo, lo. But if he did not nullify, then he said, no. The house, they have the same status as a house. Even you put all this hay in. So basically it means, we are on page 79, so the top of the house can be a chatzitza from the core, that it doesn't, as you know, in Tumayin Tahara you have this hole that it's basically that hole it's fillet. So why the Mishnah? The big question is why the Mishnah said that this, if you use the ditch and you fill it with the dirt, it's considering a valid even without making any statement, clear statement. Amar Rav Huna, man Tana olot Rabbi Yossi. He said this Rabbi Yossi is the Tana in the Mishnah. They say they don't accept his opinion. So the Rashi in Tosfot here said Rav Huna wasn't sure what is Rabbi Yossi's opinion. He knew that Rabbi Yossi is one of the Tanaim that dealt with that subject, and therefore he doesn't bring the source. It's the opposite. So they said, I Rabbi Yossi ipchash min alei. If you go by Rabbi Yossi, it's the opposite. Why? the Tani Rabbi Yossi אומר תבן ואין עתיד לפנותו, הרי הוא כסתם עפר. הוא בטל. If you have this type of teven, so he said, it's this hay, you know, clearly he's not planning to move it from there. So what's the difference if you make this declaration or not? If you know that he's not planning to move it, it's just the same as a regular dirt, and therefore it's not considering as a he doesn't nullify. So that the idea of what we have exactly in the house, it's not the point. The point is if the owner planning to remove it or not. So they said, Amela Marabasi, you need to explain it, and he said, Man Tana Eiruvin, who is the Tana that teaches us that if you fill up with the dirt, even without making a statement, it's have to be Rabbi Yossi, which means that Rabbi Yossi is the Tana does not accept the opinion of the Tana of the in Aholot, but it basically a hold that you need to make a very clear declaration. So now Rav Huna ben Rav Yoshua Amar is another explanation. Tum'a Ashabat Karamit. You ask from the din of Tum'a in our Mishnah, in a Mishnah in our Lord, to our Mishnah here. He says it's two different things. Hanach Isur Shabbat, Da'afilu Arna Keinam Mevatel Inshei. So you can compare the two. Why? Because when it comes to Shabbat prohibition, so a person nullifies even a pouch full of money. Why? Because it's the carrying prohibition. So even during the week, all this dirt is not nullified only if you make a very clear statement, as we said in the Mishnah in our Lord. But in Shabbat is different. Why? Because this is a muktzeh, it's set aside, that dirt, and you cannot carry that dirt on Shabbat. So therefore it's nullified from their spot even without making any statement. Another way to understand it, Rav Ashi Amar, Bait Acharitz Karamit. He says, are you raising a contradiction between the halacha in regard to a house to the halacha in regard to a ditch? Bishlama charitz lemetamei el habayit lemetamei. So if you tell me it's come to this ditch, maybe it's an issue of tum'ah, but does a house tend to be permanently filled? For sure not. So therefore the hay and the dirt will be removed. So you need to have more proof in order to have the owner of the house intend to seal it permanently. Now we go to the continuation of that Mishnah, and they said Natan alav neser. Look at this picture number 270. Does everyone see it? Okay. Natan alav neser. between the two he put this neser, the plank. So they said שרוחב 4, המרבה לא שנו אלא שנתן לרוחבו, אבל אורכו אפילו כלשהו נמי, שהרי מייתו 4. So he said that's apply only put it, okay, only put it along the width of the ditch. But if you position in its length, so even they have the minimum of the width, it's considering an entrance, and he basically reduced the ditch to 4 handbreadth, less than 4 handbreadth. So, meaning originally the ditch was a 4 handbreadth, but now because of that, if one place a plank of any width along with its length, it becomes less than 4 handbreadth wide, and it's not considering as a mechitza, because look what's happening. It's kolshehu. Or another thing we learn in the Mishnah, he said v'chen shnei gzuz traot, and also you see this is the 2 properties, and in between you have reshus harabim, a public domain. Now you put these gzuz traot, you see the 2. So they said if you have the 2 balcony are opposite than each other, and one place a plank 4 handbreadth wide between them, the residents of the 2 courtyards may establish a single eruv, as the plank is considered an entrance from one courtyard to the other. Right? So he said, וכן שתי גזוז שטרות, זו כנגד זו. אמרה והדה אמרת זו כנגד זו, אין זו שלא כנגד זו, לא. למעלה מזו, he says, למעלה מזו, נמי לא אמרן, אלא שיש בין זה לזה 3 טפחים. אבל אין בזה וזה 3, גזוז טרה קומאי. So he said that that's only applied when you have between the 2 and 3 handbreadth. You see, this is the balcony, this is the balcony, and you have, if you put this one, you see there are 3 handbreadth. That's the way that it's applicable. So in other words, you have the 2 balconies that separate with the gap of less than 3 handbreadth, so they're considering as joined based on the principle of lavud that have to be 3. So you see again, it's the whole principle of having 3 handbreadth between the 2. That's the condition of lavud to make it together. Now we're going to a practical halachot. First halacha is a Rambam, Ilchot Shabbat, chapter 14. Amud Birshut HaYachid, a pillar standing in a public domain that is a 10 handbreadth high and 4 handbreadth square has the status of private domain. However, the Raavad said that if one drove a stake into it that is 3 handbreadth tall, he has diminished his height. So it seems that the Rambam had a different version of the text, as he understands that the stake was inserted into the wide of the pillar, and that the heights of the pillar is measured from the location of the stake. We also discussed the Magid Mishneh speaks there about the ladder, the Godel HaSulam, the ladder that is in a bit more than 7 handbreadth tall. It's sufficient to diminish the height of the wall, that is a 10 handbreadth high. That's the opinion of Rav Huna, son of Rabbi Yeshua. And we talk about the heaviness, the heavy ladder and stumps of palm tree that are placed next to the wall serve to diminish its height. Even though it's permissible to move them, their weight establishes them as a fix in place, because it's very hard to move those ladder from one location to another. We talk about Hakikat HaKotel. If one hollowed out grooves in the wall in order to complete the measure of a narrow ladder of 4 handbreadth wide. So the Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim 372 said that the grooves are required only to up to a height 10 handbreadth, but if one hollow out the entire ladder in the wall, then the steps, which must be 4 handbreadth wide, must reach the top of the wall. We talk about the Asherah and the tree. If one fashion a ladder for the wall out of a living tree, this effectively diminishes the heights of the wall and permits the use of the wall on Shabbat. However, the heights of the wall may not diminish by means of an Asherah. That's the Rabbah's opinion. And the Vilna Gaon hold that it's if the height of the wall may be diminished by means of the Asherah, the Vilna Gaon, yes, and the Rosh hold that the tree is prohibited, but one is permitted to utilize a dried Asherah. Because think about it, they use that to say idle, but it's now dried. We talk about ditch, 10 handbreadth deep and 4 handbreadth wide, appeared in 2 courtyards. The residents of each courtyard must establish a separate Eruv, even if the ditch is filled with straw and hay. However, if the ditch is filled with dirt, it is nullified, and the residents of the 2 courtyards establish an Eruv. We said if a plank 4 handbreadths wide is placed between the 2 balconies that face each other, the residents of the 2 balconies may establish a single Eruv. And we said that it's very important to know that they have to have the principle of lavud, which means that if you have the 2 balconies that face each other, or a case of one balcony positioned above the other at the same wall, if the balconies are separated by the gap of more than 3 handbreadth in heights, which is the principle of lavud, they cannot be joined by means of plank. If the difference in heights is less than 3 handbreadth, so now it's the principle of lavud, it's considering a single crooked balcony, and is permitted, as the Rava said, and that's basically in Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim 373.